It's humbling to be up here in front of you guys and to have the opportunity to speak about an experience that radically changed the way I look at the world, so thank you for listening. Last year I spent 9 months in Latin America, and the last 2 weeks of this incredible experience took me to the forbidden lands of Cuba. And it really all stemmed from just this weird obsession I've had with Cuba for the longest time. Nobody knows anything about it. You know, it's so close to us, yet so far away. And I wanted to see, feel, touch Cuba for myself. And so, I went to Cuba. And, And for 2 weeks, I went around and I spoke with as many people as I possibly could about what Cuba meant for them, what their passions were, what drove them, how it was to live in a family in Cuba, what they thought about communism, the United States, everything. Armed with a camera and a notebook, I tried to document as much as I could, and did kind of like a self-imposed sociology project, and just spent 2 weeks completely nerding out in Cuba. And from this, I gained a few insights, and I'd love to share those with you guys today. So today we're going to talk about 3 things. 1, why Cuba is a beautiful lie. 2, why people are better than the stereotypes we put on them. And 3, how unstereotyping can change the world. So what do we really know about Cuba? Oh, come on. It's got a delay. It's kind of like TiVo. So what do we know about Cuba? I went around and I talked to some friends, eventually started pestering even random strangers, what do we know about Cuba? And everyone came up with the same 4 things. It was creepy. It was, Cuba, they're communists, right? Don't they have Fidel Castro? He's got the big beard. Or Cuba, they're really poor. Don't some Cubans swim to Florida every once in a while? Or Cuba, cigars, right? Yeah, Cuba. And my favorite, Cuba, do they still have missiles? What we know about Cuba is based in stereotypes, and it's totally wrong. It's unjust that we take these quick answers that we have for problems, and we throw them on ideas such as Cuba. And what's so terrible about this is the fact that we should care about Cuba. We should care about it. Cuba is 90 miles off of our coast. 90 miles. So the next time you jump in a car on the highway and drive an hour and a half, you have traversed the distance it would take to get to Cuba. That's how far away it is. Yet we know nothing about it. So let's take a field trip to Cuba. Come on. People use communism to describe Cuba more often than not. And I like to use that as a frame to show how stereotypes really aren't just. So communism, what does it actually mean? What do we know about communism? What I thought it was before going was I would show up in Cuba and they would immediately arrest me. That was my initial thought. And then I went on the internet, and Google was kind enough to tell me that no, lots of Americans go to Cuba. Cubans love Americans. They're very intelligent. They make the distinction between a government and the people, and I would have no problems. And so I was like, yes, we go to Cuba. But still in the back of my mind, there was this little seed of an idea planted. What if I go there and get arrested? What if I could just get locked up in a prison and I never come back for the rest of my life? And so fast forward, and I'm stepping off a plane, living the dream. I'm actually in Cuba. My eyes are opened, I'm touching, feeling, seeing this dream I've had for the longest time. And this big, burly military man turns the corner, and he's one of the first guys that I saw in an official uniform. He's got patches down his sleeve detailing all the exploits he's had. He's got a rifle in his hand, a mustache bigger than Neil's that struck fear into the children of my children. He looked at me in the face, looked in my eyes, and he says, "Usted, ven aquí," which means you, come here. And I'm like, me? And he goes, "Usted, ven aquí." And I walk over, and this little seed is growing into a forest. And now I'm thinking, holy crap, I'm going to rot and die in a Cuban prison. I'm going to eat dry, stale rice and beans for the rest of my life. I'm never going to see my family again. I'm never going to see my friends again. This was a terrible idea, and I'm never going to have a puppy. 3 minutes later, me and Jorge had finished talking. He was a wonderful guy. He just wanted to know that I wasn't a spy, and obviously I'm not James Bond. So we were on great terms. He was a great guy. And that's how I started Cuba, with this stereotype that turned into a real person, a real interaction with somebody. And so what is communism? What is communism for real? Communism means just like we think, just like a lot of people throw at it, a lack of freedoms. So, and it's different in every country. This is just my experience in Cuba. But you can't put your hand out of the window of a car. That's illegal. You can't leave the country without permission from the government. You couldn't buy and sell private property until a month before I showed up in 2011. It also means that there's extreme censorship. Cuba's winning in something. They actually have, they were ranked by Reporters Without Borders as being one of the most censored countries in the world. Yes. But on the other end of the spectrum, there are things that we don't know about. There's the story that isn't told. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. So have you all ever thought about the Cuban education or healthcare system? Education in Cuba is one of the best systems that they have in Latin America. There's a 97% literacy rate. They have a less than 1% dropout rate compared to the 27% we have here in the States for high school students. We look at healthcare, and they have one of the most amazing healthcare systems in the world. It's world-renowned. A Cuban male lives on average 75 years, with females living 79 years. They have twice as many doctors per person as we do here in the States at 5.9 per 1,000 people. And on top of that, there are 51,000 Cuban doctors outside of Cuba in the world right now helping out in other places, such as Pakistan, working in disaster relief, in Africa, working to fight AIDS, and all throughout Latin America. They have an amazing healthcare system. And one of my friends in Cuba, one of my friends that really impacted me, he graduated university and had 5 brain surgeries for free. Because in Cuba, the healthcare and the education are completely free. It's incredible. And yet that's the part of the story we don't hear about. Let's take a look at jobs for a second. So we're all worried about jobs here. In Cuba, more or less everybody has a job, and they're given the job by the government. And the government decides how much everybody gets paid. So if you're a teacher, you get paid on average $17 a month. If you're a doctor, you'll get $30 a month. And everyone else gets somewhere in between. So there's an equality through poverty that they have. It's absolutely incredible. It's really interesting. So imagine a society where nobody has enough money to really buy anything. Everything is old, like this car. All the cars are from the 1950s. People live in houses that their grandparents had because you don't have enough money to buy a house. Yet through that, they're not materialistic on the whole. It's really interesting. And on top of that, because of the fact that everybody makes between $17 and $30, people look for other ways to get money. So a lot of friends have relatives that will send money to them, and that's how they can buy something new. Or all the taxi drivers I met were doctors or engineers or lawyers before they became taxi drivers, because if you work in tourism, you can bring money in from outside of Cuba. It's a crazy phenomenon. But if you take that to another level, when everyone makes $17 to $30 a month, the government has to do something about food, because at $17 a month, how much can you really eat? So they subsidize the food. And just to give you an example of what that looks like, for their beef ration per month, for the average Cuban, it's about 2 Big Macs, more or less, which is actually kind of good. I think Castro was onto something, because in Guantanamo Bay, they have the one McDonald's in all of Cuba, and the line would just get ridiculous if people had more than 2 Big Macs a month. But that's communism. And what's interesting is we throw this stereotype on communism, and we don't see the good parts about it. We use these stereotypes, and they hide what's really going on. So let's take a look at people, because they're the ones that really get hurt in this scenario. People are degraded through stereotypes. We take the humanity out of somebody when we meet them, because immediately, without even knowing, we size them up. And people do it to different degrees, but unconsciously or subconsciously, we look at somebody, we see how you look, we see your facial expression, we see the color of your skin, we see how you talk, we listen, and we determine in our minds how educated you seem to be, where you're from. And we use that to put you in a box based on what society has told us and based on the experiences we have with our friends, our families, and our experiences. And these stereotypes make human relations, it puts a dampener on people's dignity, on who they actually are. It throws out the window who they are as a person, what they care about, what they value, in favor of this stereotype to make something easy, to put somebody in a box. I want to introduce you to Miguel the patriot. That's what I call him. I was walking down the street one day, and his grandson was playing baseball right in front of him against a wall. I started talking to Miguel, and after 3 minutes, I go, Miguel, ¿dónde encontraste sus zapatos y su reloj? Where'd you get your shoes and your watch? Those are really cool. And Miguel looks back at me, and he goes, I may look really simple, but I'm very proud of my job. I was like, okay, cool. Didn't really answer my question. That's cool. And he goes, this watch was given to me by a diplomat. because I am the driver for all the diplomatic envoys that come here to Cuba. My job is to take them where they need to go, and then also, in the downtime, show them other different cultural aspects of Cuba. That's why I have these shoes, too, because my shoes aren't a reflection of me. My shoes are a reflection of the Cuban people. Whenever I'm working, I am not a reflection of myself. I'm a reflection of my people. So I need to be the best reflection I possibly can. I was like, that's incredible, Miguel. So did the government give you those shoes? Again, the stereotype I had. He goes, no, I spent 3 months' salary on them. How many guys in this room would spend 3 months' salary on a pair of shoes? Girls, you don't count. Seriously, it's incredible. Who would spend 3 months' salary on a pair of shoes? Look at those pairs of shoes. I mean, they're pretty nice. But 3 months? It's a long time. Miguel then offered to take me around over the next 2 days and show me the different places that he usually takes people, just for fun, for free. It's illegal for him to walk around with me and take me around without a permit, but he wanted to do it. We had a little arrangement. This is where the whole spy thing comes in. If anybody asks us about it, I was like marrying his daughter's something, something, something. I don't even know how it worked out, but he offered to do that just after meeting me on the street. And then that day, Miguel took me up to his house, and which was a very humble little apartment. And he goes and he takes me to his library, which was a piece of plyboard and 7 books. And on this shelf of 7 books, which he was very proud of, he said he read all of them 100 times, which I don't know. He read them 100 times. But he takes the top one off, and he pulls it out, and he goes, Kevin, I want you to have this. I've known him for 3 hours. He goes, Kevin, this is the story of Fidel Castro. I quote, one of the most amazing human beings to ever walk this planet along the lines of Mother Teresa and Einstein, and you need to know about him. And I was like, okay, thank you so much. You know, this man is like offering one of these 7 books he has just because he wanted me to learn. See, Miguel, if I would have stereotyped him, was a raging communist. He was a die-hard commie who had drinking the Kool-Aid for the past 70 years of his life. If I would have stereotyped him and used the ideas that we have here, he would have had a Russian accent and we would have been in a submarine. But Miguel was an incredible human being. And when he shared his story, when he was given the chance to show who he really was, what he cared about, what drove him, that's when Miguel became a person and not a stereotype. I'd like to introduce you to somebody else too, Luis el Poeta. Luis is, I was walking down the street, and just like we do so many times here in Raleigh, you see somebody who looks kind of homeless. But Luis looked up at me with a huge smile, and I smiled back. We started up a conversation. Turns out Luis, ever since he retired from being a baggage claim guy at a hotel, that's his baggage claim cart, he's come out and sat on this street corner every single day for 2 hours and written poetry. Because Luis loves poetry, and he loves talking to people and getting to know who they really are, and then taking that little core value of whoever this person is, connecting it to something in Cuba, and then he pulls out an Italian almanac that somebody gave him. It's written in Italian, he can't read it. And he looks at the geographical formations around the hometown of whoever he's talking to, and he connects in his poem Cuba, this person that he just met, and then rivers, valleys, mountain ranges, oceans around where they're from to connect, to make a poem that's really a reflection of their journey to Cuba. And Luis has written poems about every single state in the United States. He's almost through all the capital cities. He says the Midwesterners don't travel as much. He's written a poem about every single country in the Western Hemisphere. He's written a poem about all of Europe, every single country. He's starting on Africa right now, and he said he's kind of scared to get to Asia because he doesn't know how he's going to make the rhyming work. Luis is an incredible human being. He is a man that is living what he should be living and doing amazing things. But if I would have just walked by and put him in a box like we do so often in our lives, he would have been just a guy dressed kind of raggedy and sitting on a cart that made him look kind of homeless. And when we put people in these stereotypes, when we categorize people, when we meet them, we degrade their humanity. We take out who they really are and don't give them a chance to be who they are. This is Luis writing me a poem. So we've talked about why Cuba is a beautiful lie and why people are better than the stereotypes we throw on them. Now let's talk about how unstereotyping can change the world. So whether we want to or not, we stereotype. And we use these stereotypes as simple answers for problems that we have. And just like we heard earlier in the poetic poets of the Revolution, we take away the humanity of these people, their real stories, how they actually feel. You can't understand something in 2 sentences. And the terrible part is, this leads to war, to racism. Stereotypes are the basis that people use to hate, to degrade people and make them not human. And we need an army of people dedicated to unstereotyping, an army of people who see someone and see them as a person and want to get to know who they really are, what they value. And so that's what I challenge you to do today. Be this army. Unstereotype your life. Be conscious of the thoughts that you're having and where you get your information. Be conscious if you look at somebody, if you're at the grocery store and the guy in front of you is talking like this, buying a 12-pack and about to go watch the game, don't immediately think he's Larry the Cable Guy. Okay? Take a step back, have a conversation with him. Have a genuine conversation with this man. You know, he could be an extremely funny individual. He could be a dedicated father. He could also be an asshole. But he deserves the chance to show that to you. Don't put him in a box. Start conversations with strangers. So if you're from the country, talk to somebody from the suburbs. Suburbs, talk to somebody from the country. Find somebody from out of the United States, if you live in the States, and talk with them. The next time you hear an accent, go up, tap the person on the shoulder, say, hi, my name's... See what they really care about. See what drives them, who they are. Ask them what they had for breakfast this morning. It's probably different from what you had. And finally, travel. Travel is the most amazing thing in the world, and I don't want to talk about it because I could just sit up here for like days and talk about travel. It's literally changed my life. If you haven't traveled, please go somewhere. Travel, and whether that is jumping to another country and seeing for yourself what it's really like, whether that's feeling and touching and seeing one of these stereotypes that we have, or whether it's going down to the local Asian market, buying a book and reading it, you know, whether it's watching a documentary, jump out of your comfort zone. We live in a bubble, pop it, and walk to the other side. So, Cuba, for me, was a beautiful lie. And what we need is an army of people dedicated to seeing what else is a beautiful lie and forming genuine connections with other people, as opposed to putting these people in stereotypical boxes. So my question to you before I leave is, what else in your life is a beautiful lie? Thank you so much.